of God through a diversity of gifts, Christ's body grows towards being as complete as he is. And in the end, will be as complete as he is when we're raised from the dead. Through us, the victorious heavenly life of Christ is to gain expression in all the structures of human existence. So after Paul talks about this ascension of Jesus above the heavens and giving all these gifts to the church, we find things about spirit-filled worship. The spirit-filled worship of the people of God participates in the celebrations of the heavenly throngs, celebrating the victory of Christ, moves the people of God towards their call to fill all things in Christ. And later in Ephesians 5, the marriages of Christians share in the love of the exalted Lord for the church and the submission of his bride, the church, and are a sign that marital bliss will fill the universe forever. Now, I don't want to get carried away, but that's what the Lord spoke to me when Donna and I were on the island of Patmos. He said, "Don't you know, marital bliss will fill the universe forever." Now, sometimes it seems, some of the people I have to try and help, that marital misery. Someone came to see me about something who's not married yesterday, and someone else was talking to him about something to do with marriage and said, "Misery likes company." That's because that person has lots of struggles in their marriage. Misery likes company. But, and I said, well, C.S. Lewis said something like, marriages are can be like heaven, or they can be like hell, or they can be like both. Do you understand that? Joy and terrible. They can be like both. And then, Paul moves on in chapter 6, talks about slaves and masters, and they're to note, he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, because it's all heavenly, reflecting the heavenly life. Where does the church exist? In the sphere of the heavenly places. And Christians should remain there in their relationship with God by faith and obedience, which are really the same thing. Well, none of this happens quietly. You cannot make known this great victory and the perfection of wisdom through the suffering of the cross quietly. I'm not saying you have to shout. But you can't make this known quietly. Why? Because it's fiercely resisted by the powers of evil. Now, whether you're going to have to go through an anguish existentially in your own soul, or conflict with people, or some other thing, you cannot make this known in passivity. Now, Dale's talked about this, as I have. Churches are full of passive people, which means they're people whose lives have been taken captive by the powers of evil. Now, if they're Christians, they really belong to Jesus. But passive people are people who've been taken captive by the powers of evil. They're deceived. Dark forces are watching every assembly, every church meeting, every gathering of Christian people. And they're continually seeking to frustrate the displays of the manifold wisdom of God and to deny the loving fatherhood which originally created them. So we're at war against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. So what do? You put on the armour of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. Now, the armour of God, if you go back into Isaiah 11 and 59, the armour of God is the armour of the divine warrior himself. It's God's own armour. Forget about Roman soldiers for the time being, because God has faithfulness as the belt of his loins. He puts on righteousness as a breastplate, and he puts a helmet of salvation on his own head. So if you want to find someone who's lived out the armour of God, who do you look at? You look at Christ. You can't look anywhere else, because if you look somewhere else, well, you've been taken captive. So all these attributes of the armour of God are in Christ, in whose victory over the forces of evil we share and whose gospel we proclaim. So we've got this ministry to show and reveal Christ through sharing in his life and in contention against the powers of evil who continually want to deny really who Jesus is. Well, let me come to the conclusion. Now, Paul has this grand vision. You know, why do I remember this from 1975? There's lots of things I don't remember. I can't remember what I don't remember. Why do I remember this? Because it's so great. This plan to unite heaven and earth in Christ. And Ephesians in particular, well, the whole Bible, brings an invitation to share in Christ's victory over the powers of darkness. Because, you know, that's more than our sin. In an ever-expanding, spirit-directed movement, it's all about mission, really. The church is called to fill all things with the fullness which she has in Jesus. In a conflict which is ultimately about fatherhood. As I say to people, you know, the final question is there a father, and what sort of a father is he? Well, Jesus has said, yes, there is a father, and you see what sort of a father he is. Look, when you look at me. In a conflict which is ultimately about fatherhood, the forces which hold lost people in complete captivity, which is what Paul says in chapter 2, really, of Ephesians, these forces can only be conquered by living out the shape of the life of Christ. Well, what am I getting at here? The shape of the life of Christ. I said to someone the other day, I can't remember who it was, I said, you know, history is cruciform. They looked at me. It means it's shaped, it's all about the shape of the cross in everything, the life of the cross in everything. Well, this is what Paul's getting at when he says in Ephesians 3:13, he says, I ask you not to lose heart over what I am suffering for you, which is your glory. And it's through this attitude and life that God in Christ and through his servants brings the church into the glory of heavenly things. The pattern of divine victory established throughout the whole Bible, especially a lot of the Psalms, the victory Psalms, of which Psalm 68 is one. The pattern of divine victory is that, first of all, God breaks the people and then he gives them a breakthrough. He breaks their confidence, their self-confidence, their arrogance, and sometimes this takes him quite a long time. Yeah? And then he gives them a breakthrough. The breakthrough is his kingdom. Until the Lord has brought us low, we cannot see into the things which are far above, which is where Christ is, where he is in the heavenlies, and we can't understand our tremendously exalted status in him. Understanding that being brought low is the way of God should lift us out of our present discouragements. Oh, this is such a battle for me. You know, sometimes I say, it comes with the territory. If you've got a sort of prophetic witness, you see so much bad things, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So many bad things. But this sense of where we're called to in Christ can lift us out of our present discouragements concerning the depressed state of the church and move us to what? Pray bold prayers for the manifestation of the victory of Christ. Now, they're prayers that God will answer, because they're not prayers about your condition of life or those close to you. They're prayers about why the universe was created, that the glory of the Father in the end would fill everything because of Jesus. Now, I'm finished, and Dale will